Howdy there once again. Welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Glad you're with us. Today, I have the honor and pleasure of speaking to Jaclynn, or sometimes we even call her Jackie. And Jackie is really kind of a cool person for a lot of reasons, because Jackie Robinson is, among other things, a graduate of UC Irvine, where I graduated and ended up getting my master's degree in physics without blowing up the university. She came along a lot later than I did, yeah, and she studied law and criminology and other things. So I think statute of limitations is gone, so I'm safe. Was worried there for a
We won't
second,
come
but
after you.
yeah, we won't, not too much anyway. But she has a fascinating story. She's um, an executive coach, among other things. She has helped a lot of organizations and people with a variety of issues in terms of moving forward, and she'll tell us about that. Before the pandemic, she also worked with incarcerated people, and I love what you described them as what was it, pre or early entrepreneurs?
Entrepreneurs in training.
Entrepreneurs in training. Yes, there you go.
Yes.
So, Jackie, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
Well,
excited to be here.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Well, tell me a little bit about you, sort of maybe the early Jackie growing up and all that sort of stuff, where and all the good stuff to lay the foundation for whatever comes later.
Yeah, all the goodies. Well, I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am a Sooner. So apologies to any Cowboys fans. We have a big rivalry in Oklahoma between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma University. And I think from, quite an early age, I knew I was going to be involved with people, places, and animals. I loved culture growing up. I was all about saving the dolphins, saving the rainforest. Signed up to all of those magazines as an 8-year-old, had them all on my wall. Wanted to adopt every child overseas and wanted to explore every country overseas. So flash forward to now, and it was no surprise that international psychology, criminology, and sociology became my, kind of my anchors in life for how I support people and travel the world and all of that good stuff.
So you went and you got your undergraduate studies where?
University of Oklahoma
University of
in
Oklahoma.
criminology.
So, yeah,
Yes.
that's fair. Criminology. Why criminology?
I'm so fascinated by the criminal mind, um, and just
Did you
how
ever, did you
people
ever
get
want to be one
there.
just to see how it worked, or
No,
okay?
no, I'm so boring. You know,
Well,
I'm so boring. There's not speeding tickets. There's not much to find. I am just the boring person. But I've always been so fascinated by those that have just turned
yeah.
to crime, whether it's nature versus nurture. And so I really was interested in actually Homeland Security or the CIA and becoming a spy or a forensic crime scene investigator. So that was kind of the path I thought I was going to take. And psychology was where I started shifting into that master's initially so that I could, shape up for that. And then I decided, I don't think this world is for me. And I moved towards performance coaching.
Well, so what kind of work did you do after college?
I was a behavioral therapist or qualified mental health counselor or professional is what they would call them for juvenile delinquents. So I did
Ah,
that. I worked for a city attorney's office as well. So the juvenile population was where I spent my early years of time. And then was in a PhD program for forensic psychology. Loved everything about the materials and the course and, the courses, but it was, it's so serious and you spend the entirety of your days behind the prison system. And, being on site here and there is one thing, but going there pretty regularly to run forensic psychology assessments was something different. So that's when I started to kind of switch gears to say, what else might there be for me to get involved in?
And so, how did that lead to what you do today?
Yeah, I found an international psychology PhD program, and all the lights and bells and whistles went off, and it was just kind of like, hello, this is your sign of what you should do, what you should be involved in. It was everything. I got to study, cultures across the world. I love traveling. Um, it's thinking about the individual. It's thinking about us as we relate to the environment around us from that collective side. And from there, I just hit the ground running. So it's much more positive psychology focused and cultural psychology focused.
So, kind of what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it means the way that I've described it, especially with the pandemic, international psychology comes in and studies individual and collective. It essentially studies global phenomena to say, how does this impact us from an individual level and then a collectivist or societal level? And then how do we make sense of it and support people through it? Whether it's an actual culture, it could be a war-torn population, it could be a global pandemic, it could be uh, a pandemic that only one country might be, uh, observing at that point in time. But it could also be within the organization. Organizations are kind of a person in itself if we look at it as a living, breathing being with the people that are incited and engagement and their performance and their well-being. And so it's just really allowed me to kind of take off to say, okay, how do I want to support cultures overall? And so I worked with the refugee population as part of my doctoral work. And then also just within organizations. So that's what kind of got me into management consulting and working with a global management firm and supporting organizations that want to see their people thrive versus survive.
Yeah, which is an interesting distinction and an important one. Says we all talk about surviving, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're thriving very well, does it?
No. And so many people are hurting, especially after the
Hmm.
pandemic. So there's a lot of fulfillment in seeing people re-identify what their purpose is or find a new purpose, and then just you see them open up and blossom.
Hmm. Well, you did mention that you'd worked with the refugee population. I think I read that you worked with Syrian refugees during your PhD studies. Tell me more about that, if you would. That
Yes.
that sounds like it would be very fascinating in a lot of ways.
It was extremely fascinating. I worked with them. Well, when I was doing my dissertation, the Syrian civil war was still pretty early on. And so I received a lot of no's for my dissertation board at that time of how I was going to access the culture because it was pretty difficult. There was not really going to be an opportunity to go into Syria.
Hmm.
Instead, it was where are a lot of Syrian refugees, and then what might be an organization that I can partner with to help me find them, identify those refugee centers, and hold interviews. So initially, I was looking at Switzerland, but I was able to find some really great support with a Syrian refugee center and nonprofit in Berlin, Germany. So
Mm.
I did my research in Berlin, and I want to say it was 2014. When I had started conducting my research, it was 2012. So it was really early, about a year or so into the Syrian civil war, but absolutely fascinating. And I loved every minute of connecting with them and working with them.
Now, why Syria and Syrian refugees specifically?
So this is where you'll see the criminology tie in because
Aha.
initially
Here we
my
go.
yeah, my refugee work was so at UC Irvine, I in my criminology, law, and society thesis, I was focusing on the learned behaviors of terrorism. So flash forward to my PhD program, I wanted to focus on interviewing more of the types of criminals involved. I wanted to have more of my studies based on terrorism and the Syrian civil war. And I had one of my professors say, I don't know how you're going to get access to Guantanamo or any of these facilities where you might be able to interview them. but I had been reading books at the time and it had been done. So, unstoppable mindset. I'm like, hey, we've got this. There's always a way in. But he said, why don't you switch gears and start to think about those that are impacted by terrorism instead, the population's impacted. And that's when the Syrian refugee population was, really big, and we were seeing it in the news all the time. And so I started to switch gears into that.
So, did you ever get a chance to actually interview criminals or people who were on that side of terrorism, or did you mainly just
Nope.
deal then with the other side?
Yep, I just dealt with the other side, with the
Uh-huh.
refugees. And I was already at UC Irvine. They had a really wonderful program where you could work with refugees that were living within the Southern California area. So working with kids on art therapy, supporting families with mentorship, helping them learn English, helping them with just their day to day. I was already involved with Syrians through a UCI program. And so it just made a lot of sense with everything that was also happening in the war to use that as a population, because I really just started to feel a connection to that group.
So, what kinds of things did you learn from interviewing them and talking with them? Because you're looking at terrorism from one side of it, and I appreciate that. But what did you learn, or kind of conclusions did you draw?
From the refugee side, I mean, really speaking of unstoppable mindset, what tended to support their resilience was family connection. Family is so strong, and so having cell phones, which many of them were able to have in Berlin to be able to connect with their families back in Syria, was a way to manage anxiety or manage depression or feeling disconnected. Um, in the refugee centers where they would stay, you'd have a range of different refugees. It might not just be all Syrians. You might have Palestinians. You might have other folks in there as well. And so they would start to create their own, specific communities within the refugee facilities so that they could feel more connected with one another. They could lend support, they could share bicycles. And so that was really big, was seeing how much the family connection means. There's also just a lot of resiliency and gratitude that they had for countries that would take them in. So one thing that came up very strong was this idea of wanting to give back to the community that welcomed them in. So wanting to try to learn German in this case as fast as they could so that they could acquire a job once they, were allowed, so that they could give back. Those that were already in college would have a difficult time because they were, studying Arabic. They were fluent in Arabic, but now you're going to a German university and you've got to be at the collegiate level of knowing the German language. So if they were studying to be a vet or a physician or, a psychologist, they would be backtracked quite a bit, but there was still that level of gratitude and hunger to want to learn the language and give back as soon as they could. So it was really heartfelt. It was very heartwarming, actually, to see the level of resilience that they had.
And I'm sure you found people who were all over the spectrum or in different parts of the spectrum, from being very tenacious and able to move forward to some who maybe weren't quite so successful at it.
Hmm. And most of that was just based on the admin process of the paperwork and the filing that has to take place, all the checks and balances once you become a refugee within Germany. What status you're in, if you're asylum, if you were able to be, kind of fully uh, enveloped into the community where now you could hold a job. And so many felt like they were in that sense of purgatory.
Mm.
You're kind of half in, half out because you're safe, but you're not allowed yet to get that job. So they might be trying to pick up language skills or something along the way, but they're just waiting on that letter to say, okay, you're approved. You've got full status here.
Yeah, it's always tough to be in limbo, not
Hmm.
know what's going on. Well, so
Yeah.
you did that. You got your PhD in, you said, I think 2014,
2017.
2017. Okay, so it was another
Yes.
3 years after.
Yeah. It
Okay,
was about 4 years, three and a half years. Yeah.
now it's 7 years later. So what did you do after you got your PhD?
Um, I joined well, around that same time, I was double degreeing. So I received my my degree from UC Irvine at that time, my master's degree. Before that, I had gotten a master's at Pepperdine in psychology. And so once I was done with UC Irvine and I was just starting to wrap up the PhD program, I joined a global management firm that has this high focus on positive psychology. So I work with Gallup, and I love that. I just embrace this idea that we're a part of a community, um, and that they focus so much on positive psychology, taking a strengths-based approach, focusing on engagement, focusing on the well-being of others. And so I just joined, I would say, I think it was my third year, my second or third year in my PhD program, and I've been here since.
Well,
Pretty wonderful.
yeah, I would say.
Executive coaching, facilitating, working with a range of different industries. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I feel like I always have my hands in something, right? So whenever I can do some virtual webinars and do some performance coaching with those now those that are released from the prison system and are in those post-incarceration mentor programs, that's a lot of where I spend my time now. But
Right.
when I was still living in California, I would also go to the prison systems there. Unfortunately, they're not in the Nevada area yet, so I do the work virtual. But
So
those are
what
some
did
of the things that occupy my time.
so what did you do in the prison system? You obviously worked there and felt it was worthwhile. What did you do there?
Yeah, well, it was more volunteer, but we'll go in for about 12 hours. Maybe it's 9. It's kind of that, it's like an 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. type of day.
Ah,
So
okay.
somewhere around there. And we go in, we drop off our cell phones, we leave everything, and we spend the day working with the incarcerated that are going through an entrepreneurship program. It's through Defy Ventures is the program that I'm a part of. And they've partnered with Baylor University. So Baylor
Mm,
provides entrepreneur certificates. It's an application process. So the incarcerated, that we call entrepreneurs in training,
mm-hmm.
apply to be a part of the program. So these are folks that are really wanting to change their life around and get that mentorship. For some, this is the first, certificate they've ever received. So they're graduating. Once they get out of the program, they truly get the cap and gown, and we're all there to celebrate with pizza and brownies, and their family comes, and it's a big deal. But it's the way I describe it is it's the Shark Tank for prisons. So
Mm-hmm.
this program is one where they go through business courses, and within that duration, they're also starting to curate a business idea that they could do. Can't be a storefront since that would require too much capital.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just thinking of a business idea that they could run on their own with minimal funding that they feel experienced in. And then they have, business leaders, business coaches, um, others that are, just across industry. We volunteer and go in and help them tweak those ideas and help them think through those ideas. And then there's a vote at the end, and there's monetary rewards for first, second, and third place winners, so they
So,
can start their business.
did you ever follow up or follow through with any of them when they came out of the prison system that ended up starting a business and were successful, or do you know about any of that?
Yes. Yes, yes. They have cohorts that go through. And so I was with one cohort for quite a bit pre-pandemic. I would visit them. I was in there a couple of times, and then I was there for their graduation, and they're always like, "Oh, you came back. Thank you." Uh, and then after, they can go into that post mentorship program. So they've got their idea. Once they are released from the prison system, that's when they can really implement that idea. And they've got us on the back end as well to support with that
Mm-hmm.
mentorship. And they're able to do PowerPoint presentations virtually to share out what their business is, to share links to their website, to their product, and then we can support them in either say, hey, we want to bring you on. We'd love to have you in partnership for, X company, or if we know they would be great for a company, we can bring them on and suggest them. We can buy their products. And so we really are there to support. And the recidivism rates in terms of just their return back to prison is incredibly low. I want to
That's
say it
great.
was at 94, 95% with this program.
That stayed out.
Out. Yeah,
Yeah.
that stay out. They've got the skills. They just were always, maybe they weren't given the right, you know, um, the they have the skills, but what's a great way of putting it? They didn't have the right role models,
Yeah.
is the word I was looking for, to help them curate and cultivate those skills in a way that could be meaningful and legal. They just, had to scrap by oftentimes based on their backgrounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, now they've got the positive mentorship to say, hey, let's take that and use your marketing, use your ways with money in a way that's very legal and strategic.
And self-confidence.
Yes. Yeah, because some of them, have weren't praised. They don't know what they're great at. They weren't told they were great
Yeah.
based on how they were raised. And so having people that come in and support them and have confidence in them is huge. And for
Which
those
is
that are
cool.
there for life, it warms my heart, because those that might have received life in prison, they'll go through the course, but they're there, forever through all of these cohorts as
Right.
the lifelong, Yoda.
Yeah.
So they found purpose within the prison, which I love.
To help teach and reinforce.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you did that, and now do you work for a company now, or are you running your own business?
I still volunteer with Defy, so I just do it more virtual now that I'm based in Vegas and don't have the easier access to drive to the prisons. They'll
Yeah.
do the in-prison programs, and then they have the post-release programs. So used to be a part of both. Now I do more post-release. Work with Gallup, and then I'm on an advisory board where I support um, minority collegiate scholars as we think about a
Hmm.
talent pipeline and how we continue to funnel them through. Um, so yeah, I would say there's a lot of just different things that I'm involved in.
And you're running your own
I like
business.
being business. Yeah. Yep. And that's part of the advisory that I do with that talent pipeline. That's yeah, it's fun. I before Gallup and before my PhD program, I started my company because I was doing a lot of on-air consulting in the field of criminology and psychology back when G4 and Spike TV were a network, and they were looking for someone that was not a Dr. Phil,
Hmm.
someone that was of the millennial generation growing up but had the wherewithal to just explain some of the stories that they would air on TV. So I worked a lot with story producers whenever they were doing a crime story or something related to mental health, and I'd bring in that science piece. So that's where I said, I think there's something more here, and that's where my company derived from, was being able to speak on criminology and psychology within the entertainment industry.
There's a fair amount of that goes on too.
There's a lot, yeah. And it was a
Well,
perfect marriage because I was always a very dramatic kid. I liked putting on plays.
there you go.
Didn't, yeah, yeah. Thought acting isn't for me, but I love entertainment. I love how you can tell stories and see a script come to life. I worked in international film sales and in production for quite a bit, crime thrillers, psych thrillers. And so, having that opportunity to work with story producers and be an on-air expert was just kind of a great marriage of the social sciences and media.
What's the most rewarding factor, would you say, of your work in terms of with engaging with your audience and so on?
Seeing their potential just flourish. I love when people either come to me, whether it's an organization or an individual, and they're saying, this is the problem we see. This is where we might need some support. And You see them go from maybe struggling or just surviving, as I had mentioned earlier, to thriving, because you help them start to break down what is it that gives you purpose? How do we make that a priority? How do we eliminate or delegate or even automate those things that are more draining to you or feel like drudgery? Um, you start to see their anxiety or their depression start to decrease when they start to just ground themselves in who they are and their value system, and um, things that give them a lot of joy and energy. And then when that's happening at the organizational level, it's just larger. It's that larger impact that you see across the board. So I think that's what thrills me, because it's the outcome that individuals or an organization gets out of doing the work, which is feeling like they can thrive. And I'm such a champion for well-being. I think it's so important that people focus on what it is that gives them energy. And we know how closely that ties to your mental health, to your spiritual health, to your physical health, to everything.
How did you come to really be so interested in well-being and kind of formulate the position you just stated with that?
I think I almost came across that by accident, because I was so interested in the criminal mind. I was so interested in just psychology. Um, at Pepperdine, my master's is in really that general clinical psychology, so it's been my foundation. But in performance coaching, once I got into management consulting, I started to see something different in the way that you could, connect with individuals and see that spark in them come back to life,
Mhm.
or taking something they're already great at and then just, driving them more towards excellence, and seeing the excitement and energy, or happiness in their voice was was a pleasure. So I think I stumbled on it by accident, because I never saw myself becoming a coach, an executive coach or performance coach. But it's very fun.
Well, there you go. And
Yeah.
you seem like you're well put together, you're well grounded in all of it, but you must have had some, I would assume, challenging experiences in your life. And what kind of experiences have you had, and what did you perhaps learn from them? Like, what kind of valuable life lessons have you learned from your own challenges?
Yeah. I probably started to reflect a lot more in psychology, because you have to go to counseling when you're in a psychology program. Just as every coach needs a coach, every counselor psychologist needs a counselor psychologist. So you start to do a lot of unpacking then. And I suffered from panic disorder starting in high school, where I would just have panic attacks and they would come out of nowhere, and you catastrophize and think, the sky is
Mm.
falling. So I've always had anxiety and been more of an anxious person. And medication wasn't the way to go, to be on daily medication. I'm, you know, I'm a fan of it when it needs to be daily for people, but for panic disorders, that just wasn't the case. It was more over medicating for me. So it was looking for other avenues. What can I do to, um, start to decrease anxiety and increase well-being? Working out was a way to do that. Connecting with nature and just going on hikes or walking my dog in the park allowed me to do that. Sitting down when you have panic attacks, whenever you sit and you feel the ground, you
Mhm.
ground yourself, because it takes your brain away from catastrophizing and you start to focus on, oh, the ground is cold or the ground is a rug. So you focus a lot on touch, or worry stones that people might carry around. So there was a lot of different ways to support well-being, as I started thinking about it, that didn't have to do with medication, in my case. And so that was always a big challenge that I had from high school all the way up through. I mean, even now, but I rarely have panic attacks at this point. I can count them on one hand how many I have a year, because of the other systems that I put in place. I think what triggered it from the workplace standpoint, where I focus so much on well-being to support challenging situations, was with the pandemic, because that everything but the kitchen sink was thrown at us from 2019 to 2022, I think. And you could just tell the entire world was hurting. And to be able to reach people individually through coaching was just wonderful. And then I had my own personal experience that I'd had to reflect on of how I've come through challenging times, and how well a focus on well-being helped me through it, and specifically, the multitude of ways that you can support well-being. That was what really, I think, helped me go, oh, this is where I want to spend a lot of my time in the workplace, is focused on, a strengths-based approach to supporting people and well-being,
So
and
what kind
helping
of
them
life
think of some tips and
what
tricks.
what kind of life lesson did you learn from having the panic attacks and just dealing with all that? You came out of it. What did you gain from it?
Yeah. More confidence in being able to manage through it, to be able to take the reins, so to speak, because when you're feeling anxiety, you don't feel like anything is going to work
Mm-hmm.
out. But for me, knowing that I could have some automatic systems in place, if I have a panic attack, it's really easy to say, when did I last work out? Have I eaten regularly throughout the day? Or have I, basically starved? Do I have more on my plate than necessary? Are the things on my plate something that would allow me to thrive? Or are these things that drain me of my energy? Have
Mm-hmm.
I gotten think time, because I'm someone that likes to just disconnect? And so there's kind of that list I can run through as a checks and balances to say, yes, yes, no, no, up, here's where the problem is. So I learned how to better manage it, which gave me more, I think, uh, obviously self-awareness, but even self-confidence to tackle
Mm-hmm.
challenges as they come along.
You could always
Um,
get a puppy dog to help you.
and a dog, and I have a dog
Oh,
who
good.
was registered as an emotional support animal. I'm really bummed that airplanes stopped supporting that, because people were bringing birds and pigs and pigeons and whatever else. But yeah, he's a great help. Pets are so wonderful.
What kind is
Um,
he?
he is a Chihuahua Terrier mix.
Ah,
Yeah, he's
well, yeah. The
wonderful.
the the problem with the whole airplane thing is, of course, that with Americans with Disabilities Act, the rule is that the animal has to be trained, and technically, emotional support animals aren't trained. But the issue is really what you just said, which is people would just bring anything on, and so many people would bring their dogs on airplanes and say they're emotional support for me,
Yes,
and they just misbehaved and just did all sorts of things, and nobody would deal with it.
yes, yes. It goes back to the old saying, right? Where it just takes one person
Yeah.
to take advantage of the system, and then nobody gets it anymore. And you go, ah. So,
Well, and it really
yes.
made it really, it also made it tough for us with trained service animals,
Oh my
because
gosh, yeah.
now the airlines make us jump through all sorts of hoops just to take our dogs on airplanes. And I think it's something that the airlines promoted a lot, but rather than recognizing there are a whole lot better ways to deal with it, they've made it
Mm-hmm.
very convoluted and complex. And from my perspective, uh,
I
it
agree.
it doesn't matter whether it's a service animal or an emotional support animal. If it's well behaved, who's going to notice? The problem is
Yes.
so many went on who were that were not. And even I have seen, although not on an airplane, but I've seen legitimately trained service animals that have misbehaved. And the bottom line is that you can't just take your guide dog in somewhere if your guide dog misbehaves.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same sort of thing, but it is tougher, and so many people now go off and they buy these vests and so on online, and oh, my dog's an emotional support animal. Yeah, well, that doesn't mean
Oh
anything anymore, and you
no.
brought it on yourself.
Yes. And so pay your $150 each way. Thank you.
Yeah, take it as a pet, and yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have
They're
I've
great.
had a couple of my guide dogs growled at by other dogs on airplanes, and fortunately my dogs just kind of go, give me a break, and lay down and put their head down, but still it's there and it happens, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. It is. I love
But
dogs.
we haven't had to deal with a peacock on an airplane yet or anything like that.
I know. I
Although I
love
met,
seeing the German Shepherds that just have their own seat. I just see their
yeah,
dog head. It's the most hilarious thing
yeah,
in the world.
yeah, give me a break.
About their own seat. Yeah, no
I
peacocks.
met a person once who was very proud of the fact that they got certified in Colorado the first, ready, therapy rat. I'm sitting there going,
No.
how does that work?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And then you had those people actually, speaking of planes, that would bring their hamsters and then, oh, you can't
Or
have it. And they try to
snakes?
flush them down the toilet.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my gosh. People. People.
Well, see, that means you're always going to have a job.
I know. Yeah.
And so you finally discovered though that the sky wasn't really falling, or maybe it was, but you could cope with it, huh?
I could cope. You know,
Let the
oh
sky
my
fall.
gosh. A most recent example. So you can't make this up. And this is, I have such a positive mindset typically. And so that's what else helped with, I think, thinking of grounding techniques to support well-being to reduce panic attacks was it really allowed my just innate way of wanting to think positive come through. Doesn't mean that I don't focus on problems because I know sometimes that can be the barrier label of those that are just more positive minded. Um, that toxic positivity, we've heard that term a lot, right? Where
Hmm.
you don't allow people their lived experience, but I'm very big on allow people to have their lived experience, give them their
Yeah.
time for emotions. But I love positive thinking because it allows us to come up with solutions or to get through tough times. So the most recent challenge I experienced was the day after Christmas, I ended up having a ruptured cyst
Oh,
and bled out, internal bleeding. If anyone's ever experienced it, you know how terribly painful it is. I hope I don't ever experience that again. And it was a full moon this December 26th. So I was
mm,
at the ER on a full moon the day after Christmas when everybody's there because
yeah.
nobody went, I don't think, on Christmas. And so first urgent care was on their waiting list for 5 hours in pain the whole time. But thankfully you can put yourself on a list and then you go to the clinic. They said we can't take you. We're going to fast track you to ER because this might be a kidney stone or an appendicitis thing. Okay. I'm in ER for a while. So fast forward 13 hours later, I get morphine. And it took 2 hours for it to kick in because
Mm.
my pain at that point was just so tired. They had tried other medications, props to the hospital, but nothing was working at that point. Um, so I came out of it and I just thought, well, I'm so glad that I get to at least not have surgery because I wasn't bleeding enough for surgery. And then I was thankful that 15 hours later, the pain had finally stopped and I could go home and, sleep sitting up. And that's that positive piece, right?
Yeah.
It's the positive thinking of how do we take a challenge when you know that you've had anxiety and you can go into panic attacks and manage it in a way that is effective. So I was in dire pain for a long time, but at the end of the day, I can kind of, joke about it now. Um,
So does it kind of just heal on itself, on its
it
own?
it will heal on its own, yeah.
Yeah.
So now it's just, asking those questions, what does my body need?
Yeah.
So if I need rest or a nap, then I'll take it. I do walks on the treadmill. It might be 1.7 miles per hour, not
It's still,
4 miles per hour, but it's
yeah.
walking. It's day by day progress. And so I think it's that anytime we have a challenge, how do we break it down and see the positive in it so that we can get through it? But then just, when you break it down step by step, it's much easier to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I've always been a very large water drinker, but nevertheless, I feel your pain in a sense because I did have a kidney stone once
Mm,
and it is no fun.
bless your heart. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is no fun. And it took several hours for it to pass in the hospital,
Oh
but
my
it did.
gosh.
It did. And it's just kind of one of those things that occurs.
Yeah. Ow.
Yeah.
I do not I do not envy those with appendicitis or kidney stones after feeling that pain.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Haven't had to worry about appendicitis, but did have a kidney stone. And then they said, you need to drink more water. And I said, look, I'm drinking like 80 ounces a day. But I upped
yeah.
it. But I upped it to 100. Uh, that's okay.
Oh,
Not a problem, but it's just one of those things and it goes
yeah,
on. Well,
it does. It does.
so for you, um you you are evolving like all of us. Share, if you would, maybe kind of a personal challenge or goal that you're working on now in the world.
Yeah. Well,
You
it's
must
kind
have
of
one.
yeah, it's one and the same, I think. Now it really is a challenge because I wasn't expecting to get a ruptured cyst
Well,
for
yeah.
the holidays. But I want to run my 10th official half marathon into
Mm,
February in Vegas. I did their marathon a while back and yeah, I thought, 9 half marathons officially, I'll use the air quotes, quote unquote, is good, but 10 is just now that feels more
it's a
like
better
closure.
number. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So that is end of February. Right now I'm still walking because I can't do much more. I'm just kind of going with where my body wants to go. But that is actually a fun goal and challenge. It's going to be even more of a fun goal and challenge now because it's, time the clock is ticking for training, but
Will the
we'll get
cyst heal
there.
in time, do you think?
I hope so. They said it takes a few weeks for it to break down and kind of your blood to reabsorb in your body.
Mm.
But it's all just kind of based on the individual too, in terms of how soon you can get back to
Well,
exercise and your day to day. So it starts with a walk, but
yeah.
that's my next challenge to take on. So
And if it
I
isn't
hell
in
or high
Feb
water, I'll be there.
well, if
The
it
start
isn't in
line.
February, when's the next one after February?
It'd be next year, but
Oh, a whole year.
I just sign up for another race, right? I just find one.
Yeah.
But this
Well,
would be a fun one. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
you go.
It's a good end goal to have in mind for
Yeah.
health and recovery.
And you'll be able to do it. And if it isn't in
Yes.
February, it'll come soon enough.
With both of our positive mindsets, I think we're putting the energy and this energy out there.
Yeah, listen,
It's gonna
but
happen.
listen to your body.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I could
It's
always walk, right? The walk jog if I have to.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's
Well,
that's next for me.
there
A
you go.
physical well-being challenge slash goal is the immediate next thing around the corner for me.
So what do you do in general? I think you've talked about this some, but if you want to go into more detail about it, what do you do or how do you handle stress and adversity?
Positive thinking and um, well-being tips and tricks. So and I know it might be harder for some to think more positive. By nature, some of us might be more problems focused, and that's okay. And some might be more solutions.
It's that
And
criminal tendency again. Yeah.
yeah, either one is okay. I think the coming up with that positive lens on life is just easy for me. But for those that even think from a problems perspective, it could be helpful just to say, well, what's the worst that can happen and how would I handle it? And then so that helps me get through challenges and adversity is just glass half full because
Yeah.
I can come up with solutions so much quicker. And I love having a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. So it makes me feel like no matter what's thrown my way, I'm going to have a way to overcome it. But sometimes we're just, punched in the face lots of times by life.
Yeah.
The one thing that is a constant is the change life throws at us.
Yeah.
So if there is just a lot of just challenges that are just coming, left and right, I really, really do focus on grounding techniques to support well-being. So
Do you
making sure even more so that I'm getting exercise or that I get to talk to friends or family or I'm reading a book or I'm starting to limit my calendar as much as I can.
spend time daily or often just reflecting like on how things are going and why things went the way they did, not viewing it as a failure, but rather as a learning experience to making it better down the line?
I do. My think time for that is typically when I'm outside. If
Hmm.
I'm walking my dog or I'm hiking, that's when I love just being able to think through. And it's not daily that it gets to happen, but if I can get out a couple of times a week just to be outside on a walk, then that's what I'm doing. On my treadmill, that's what I'll do. So I am a big champion of walking or running or being outside. And I share with people, there's a lot of science behind it, but we can come up with ideas and solutions and think through, our own processes and systems when we're walking. Um,
Well, and no matter what anyone does or says to you, you're still your own best teacher and you have to process it and synthesize
mhm,
it and make it work for yourself.
exactly. Yeah. And so one of the questions that I'll ask too, and you bring up that point is whenever it comes, whenever you think about what's supported you in the past when you've overcome adversity, what helps you get through that? Is it journaling? Is it bike riding? What does that look like for you? Because everyone's going to have their own mechanism. We forget what that can be sometimes when we're stuck in the weeds. So it's nice to have a mirror, so to speak, and someone that can help you reflect on that.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know, for me, a matter of uh, the glass is half full, but it's also when something is going on and you don't know necessarily directly what to do. Um, I think listening to our hearts does tend to help us, but also developing a circle of people you can go to seek advice and not being afraid to do
Mhm.
it. Too many people, I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that. I can't solve it myself. It's a sign of weakness if I let somebody else help, and that's not true.
It's yeah, spot on. We thrive in communities.
Hmm.
The South African concept of Ubuntu, I am because we are. The more we can kind of support on each other or have at least one support system in your life, it can be so beneficial.
Yeah,
We don't need to tackle it alone.
and shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah,
There's always value in a team.
that's right. Hey, we used to hunt and kill that way, right? When we were hunters and gatherers,
Yeah.
we had a tribe. We like to think it's changed, but we still need that community.
Well, we do. And it's part of our nature or ought to be. And too many people think that they don't need to. And they just think that they're being more macho and all that. And the reality is, it doesn't work that way.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Well, so tell me more about your coaching business. Do you coach people all over the country, the world, virtually, or what do you do?
I do. I coach virtually. I coach on site, but more or less it's virtually across the globe, just depending on the time zone. Typically, managers, leaders, and executives. But I also work with individuals. Love coaching students. There's something about students because they're just coming out in the world. They're super excited about it. They're just fresh faced. They've got so
Mhm.
many dreams and ideas. And so anytime I'm working with higher education, it's a pleasure because we've got a new generation that's going to go out there and do great things.
Yeah. And they
Yeah.
should be encouraged to. It's so frustrating. I see so many times like children being discouraged from being curious. They're being discouraged from
Hmm.
dreaming and moving forward with all that. There's nothing wrong with dreaming. There's nothing wrong with having hopes and learning and maybe something won't work and maybe adults recognize that, but it isn't the lesson, it's the discovery that really makes the difference, it seems to me.
Oh, that's such a great way of putting it. Yeah, having them lead with curiosity. Well, and to that point, we're seeing that the Gen Z generation is the most entrepreneurial. They've kind of
Hmm.
seen where the millennials have gone with education. Some of them are still getting their education. Some would rather, work full time and then be part time in school where their education is at least partially covered by corporations. Um, and then some are saying, "Hey, I just want to be a solopreneur." So I think we're all seeing that with social media and the way that they've become influencers or the way that they've just built companies and they're making so much money so quick.
Yeah.
So I love seeing them. It's that curious spirit they just haven't let go of, and you know, they're gonna do what they want. So they're kind of like the rebels or the renegades of all the generations, and it's fun to see.
I think that what we will see though is that you mentioned social media. The problem is that I'm not sure that we always make the best connections on social media because it is still somewhat
Yes.
separate. And I think that the people who really succeed are the ones who really discover the value of connectionalism.
Yes. Which goes to all the research that's starting to come out on how loneliness has spiked um, among individuals. And I think specifically the 18 to 35-year-old generation. Really sad. I feel really bad for those that were in college during the pandemic and they had their first, um, New Year experience online. They didn't get to have those connections that so many of us had with people and professors, and now they've got it. But I I think they're still trying to acclimate,
Well, or they
after
didn't take
being.
they didn't take
Yes.
full advantage of what they could do online. So rather than making connections through Zoom and actually having face-to-face contact and discussions, it was all done through social media, sending
Yes.
messages and so on. And that's just not the same.
No. Even now, if you put them all in a room, oftentimes they'll be on their phone,
Yeah,
not looking at each other. And I think,
I've always found
oh,
that fun. I hear jokes about kids doing that in the back seats of their cars when they're riding around with their parents. And I actually asked somebody one day, "Why do you text to the person next to you in the car?" Of course, the response was, "Well, we don't want our parents to know what we're talking about." Yeah, that's a problem
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah, but anyway,
Yeah, so
yeah.
we'll see, I suppose, for some of those that aren't solopreneurs that are actually growing companies, because they grew up at this time where loneliness and social isolation is significant. And now that's a point of research for a lot of the site, in the psychology world and sociology world. What are organizations going to look like 20 years
Hmm.
from now or 10 years from now if
Hmm.
they're the leaders of these companies and they're not used to emotional intelligence and connection? So
It'll be interesting to see what
this
they
is the
learn.
doomsday, I guess, that I just brought, huh? So even those
Well,
of us with the positive mindset can go, but wait, it'll be interesting to see, what happens.
or they're going to learn.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's a lot to be said for momentum, and the reality is that there are a lot of things that do work, and people who don't succeed are going to hopefully come to the realization, well, maybe we need to change some of what we do, and there's value to what used to be that we should be taking advantage of.
Like AI. There's a
Hmm.
lot of AI programs out there now teaching emotional intelligence.
And there's a
Yeah.
lot that AI can do. Um, and people keep talking about all the things that are bad about it and so on. Yeah, but look at all the good things that come out of it. I mean, for
Hmm.
that matter, it was artificial intelligence that did a lot of the initial work very quickly on developing the mRNA vaccines that we use for COVID.
Wow, yeah.
I heard in one report that using some sort of AI process they did in 3 days that would have taken months or years for people to do without it. And
Wow.
that's the value of the tool.
Hmm. Yes. There's so
How?
many pros, and I know there's a
Yeah,
lot of cons that people see. But of course, that's with any situation or,
sure.
outcome, of course.
We have no problem using the internet today, even though there is still such a thing as the dark web.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I've
I don't
never,
think any of us want to go back to those heavy encyclopedia books that
yeah, well,
would
there is
cover the
that too.
entire library.
Yeah,
We
there
love
is
the
that.
internet.
Yeah, I
We'll
have
adapt
never.
to AI just
I've
fine.
never visited the dark web, don't know how to do it, and it's probably inaccessible anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
so I won't worry about it. How can people apply the things that we've been talking about today? What would you do to encourage people, and what are some of the first steps they should take?
I'd have them think, on a scale of 1 to 5, I love scales. Five being I feel like I'm thriving in life. Where do you feel you're sitting? Um, if it's a 3 or a 4, then you might, and hopefully it's not a 1 or a 2, but it very well could be a 1 or a 2. But once you identify that state of well-being where you're at right now, you could just curate a list and really start to keep track of what you're doing day to day. And you could just make a side note next to each of those, daily activities, personal and professional. Do you love it? Do you like it? Do you hate it? And then over really a month's span of time, you'll very quickly be able to see where your time and energy is, where you appreciate it, and where it's draining you. And then that's going to start to give you those building blocks to say, okay, now how do I rearrange my day where I'm doing more of what I love and less of what I don't love? Um, for some, it really is a mental shift, and people have had aha moments to go, I don't like what I'm doing anymore. Like
Hmm.
professionally, I need to switch roles. You might be within the same organization, but maybe this now gives you the feedback and insights to say, this is what I'd like to do more of instead. um, this is where I'd like to delegate or maybe kind of disengage if possible. Maybe you are looking for something entirely different because it's no longer, you know, going against your moral grain or your values. But
And
that can be very, very helpful as just an initial starting point. And it's the new year, so it might be a good time to
and
start
the other
thinking through
thing that
that.
you might discover is really what you're doing, you really like doing it. You just don't think you do until you think about it. And it's all
Yeah.
about taking that time, whichever way you go, it's all about taking that time to think about it and reflect.
Yes. Yes. And what's the percentage of time you want to spend every day on that thing that you love? You might be doing it daily. Maybe it's 10%. How do you increase it to 25% if
Yeah.
that would be your sweet spot?
Yeah.
So yeah, then it allows you to really break it down and get more tactical about what is the average amount of time I want to spend here. How do
And
I
what
make
is
that
it?
happen?
What is it I don't love? And why is it I don't love it? Maybe it
Yes.
isn't really as bad as you think it is. It's all about taking the time to put things in perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And as you mentioned earlier, everyone's going to have their own time and space for that. I know parents, they can get really busy. I've seen parents that get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and they'll get in their workout or their think time because
Hmm.
that allows them to reflect. Or they get up at the same time because 4 or 5 is not their jam. Wouldn't be mine. But they'll go on a walk at maybe 6 a.m. with the kid if it's a baby. So the baby's in the stroller and they're walking outside. They're able to kind of sort through their thoughts before they check their work emails. Um, so it's really just thinking what's going to be best for me when might be an opportune time,
And I do
even if
some of
it's
it.
15 minutes.
Yeah, it isn't something that has to take a long, long time, but you
Yes.
have to take the time to do it. I tend to do it a
Yes.
lot when I'm going to bed. And I actually
Yes.
fall asleep sometimes thinking about it, but it doesn't mean you have to spend hours at it. Uh, but
Yeah.
it is important to let your mind slow down and help your mind slow down because that's going to make you a stronger and a more vibrant individual.
Yes. You reminded me of the gratitude journals,
Mm,
where you're just writing 3 things that you loved for the day or
yeah.
3 challenges you experienced and how you're going to overcome it next. And that can take 5 minutes at
Yep.
the end of the day.
It doesn't
Yeah.
need to take a long time,
No, no.
but it can be very valuable. Or go pet a dog or a cat.
Yes.
I have one of each, and the cat demands a lot of petting, but it's okay.
Ah,
She's a cutie. Well, if
what's her name?
people, her name is Stitch. We rescued her. We were
Oh,
actually going to just uh, take her and find her a home because the people who owned her, the wife had died and the husband was going into an assisted living facility and decided that he didn't want to take the cat, and he just told his caregiver take the cat to the pound, and we learned about it, and my wife said absolutely not. But then I made the mistake of asking what the cat's name was, and they said the cat's name was Stitch. Now, what you need to know about my wife, when she was alive, she passed away November of 2022, but she was a professional quilter from 1994 on. Do you think a quilter is going to let go of a cat named Stitch?
Yes.
Ain't happening.
Oh my gosh. It's a sign. That was a sign, wasn't
Oh, it
it?
was a
That
sign,
was a smile from heaven.
and Stitchy is still here
Oh.
and loves to get petted while she eats and loves to interact. So it's great.
Oh, I love that. I love that for you.
This year it'll be 9 years since in January, later in January it'll be 9 years since we got her. So she's
Wow.
she's a great cat.
Wow. It was meant to be.
Oh yeah, well, clearly meant to be with a name like
Meant to be.
Stitch. Absolutely, no question about it.
Definitely.
If
She
people
was
want to
family
reach
off the
out,
bat.
people want to reach out to you. How do they do that?
Yes, you can find me on the gram, on Instagram. I'm at Dr. Jaclynn Robinson.
And
You can
Jaclynn is
find me,
spelled
thank you, Jaclynn. Almost like
Robinson. Okay,
Jaclyn Smith, the Charlie's Angel, except with two N's.
got it.
Yes, Dr. Jaclynn Robinson. I'm also on, I've got a website. So you can also find me at jaclynnrobinson.com, which made it very easy.
There you go. That
I thought, why
works.
not? Why not just, right? You can hunt me down. And then
Yeah,
I'm also on LinkedIn. I have to check. My LinkedIn is Jaclynn Robinson. It's at Jaclynn Robinson.
yeah.
So you'd be able to find me there. And then I'm also on X, which I'm still, um, I'm surprised I didn't say Twitter. I think
I
I've
know.
acclimated to it now being called X. But under that one, I am at Nine Muses, like the
Oh,
Nine Muses of
cute.
mythology. PROD, short for Nine Muses Productions. So
That's
Nine Muses
Nine Muses
PROD.
Productions.
Yeah.
Well,
I
great.
cannot take credit for that, but my brother came up with my company name whenever I had started doing work in entertainment because the muses are such a blend of science and art and poetry and all of that. So we thought that's a good name for your social sciences and entertainment background. I thought
That's a great, very
I could
clever
not have
name.
done that better. Yeah, I cannot take the credit for that one, but I will never let it go. Like it's mine.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us. This has been a lot of fun. And I really want to thank you all for listening to us. And um, hopefully, you found some great insights with everything that Jaclynn had to say and that you will reach out to her, let her coach you, or at least it'd be great to interact and another person to talk with. We'd love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to Unstoppable Mindset. So wherever that is, please give us a 5-star review and a rating. Appreciate it greatly. Love to hear your comments and thoughts. You're welcome to email me. My email address is Michael, Michaelhi, at accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com. Or you can go to our podcast page, which is www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. So that's www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. But love those ratings and reviews. And Jackie, both for you and for all of you listening out there, if you know of anyone else who you think we ought to have on Unstoppable Mindset, love to hear from you. Really, I would appreciate any introductions and thoughts that you have because we're always looking for guests who want to come on and talk and tell their stories and all of that. So would really appreciate it if you'd suggest guests. We are always grateful for doing that. So the only thing I can say once more, Jackie, is thank you very much. It's been great that you're here. Really appreciate your time and just thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.